Hello, book nerds. I'm Aubrey.
And I'm Peyton.
And today we are discussing the award-winning feminist historical fiction book, Lessons in Chemistry.
Yes, so join us with a cup of coffee as we dive between these paper sheets.
All right. Let's do it.
Okay, first things first, as always in our episodes, we start off with a non-spoiler section just for anyone that kind of wants a glimpse of the book and our initial thoughts without getting into the plot details. So first, this will be our non-spoiler section, and then we will let you know when we enter the spoiler territory. But as
Yes.
always, we love to start off with a little plot recap, spoiler-free, of course.
Yes. All right. So the book, which I lost my dust jacket, so it kind of just looks like a lame blue version. And Peyton doesn't have the American cover. She has the gorgeous Lessons in Chemistry UK cover.
I love it.
So, this isn't what this just looks like I'm holding up a random book.
This,
But
yeah,
anyways.
and this book is so popular, you'll know the pink cover with Elizabeth
Yeah.
with the pencil behind her ear. You'll know
Yeah.
it. But
It'll be on the thumbnail.
yeah.
So this book tells the life story of Elizabeth Zott, an intelligent chemist in the 1960s who faces adversaries as she tries to pursue a life of science and logic, which this is not the time for.
I know.
Because women are not allowed to excel. The story is framed by her success as a star on her own science-based cook show, but dives deeply into her life before as a scientist and falling in love and the obstacles she faces during the show, before the show, and just kind of throughout her entire life.
Yes. Yeah, so this book totally, we read this book for our book club.
Yes.
So this genre, this chick lit, feminine, historical fiction type of book is not one that we typically would get into. Now, I've known of this book, and if someone was like, oh my gosh, and people were, but I was like, I'll get to it one day.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll probably read this book one day, but it was nowhere near the top of my TBR. So when our book club was like, hey, we're going to read this book next month, I was like, okay, I already knew that the cover I wanted. So I knew of the book.
Yeah.
And I knew the cover I want, so I knew enough that I got excited about it, but it definitely was not what we typically would jump into, especially on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one where, especially when you start it, because it tells this life story, I was kind of 3 chapters in, and I was like, what's the plot of this book? Where's the plot going? Because more traditional genre fiction stuff that we read, a lot of fantasy, but even the occasional science fiction or romance book, this is heavy on the narrative, the story, pushing forward. And you can tell that the author sat down and did the little plot roller coaster chart. And this doesn't feel like that at all because it's more of a literary fiction. It felt a little bit like the kind of book that you'd read in English class, but if you have the cool English teacher who lets you read a more modern book.
Yes. Yes, and we've all had that one teacher in high school where you're like, oh, we're not going to read John Steinbeck.
Yeah.
We're gonna read a present day really well written book, but we're gonna really go deep into the analysis.
Yeah, and this is a very well written book, and I think Peyton enjoyed it. I think you enjoyed it a little bit more than me.
Yes,
but yeah. I did enjoy it. But it's definitely something that you have to go into differently than traditional genre fiction.
Right, yeah. And I think out of the both of us, I would be the one that, I don't read strictly fantasy. I do kind of branch out into, literary fiction and, different, sub genres. I like to explore those. So, like I said, I much rather read a fantasy novel over this.
Yeah.
But it's definitely in my realm of, something I would enjoy. And when I started the book, we, of course, it's a book club. We kind of section it off into different sections of the book. You read a quarter a week, basically. And the first part, I was like, oh my God, this is moving fast. This is crazy. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And our book club was like super split. Like some people were like, I love this book. This book is so fun. It's a little like interesting. Like I don't really know where it's going, but like I like it. And some people were like, this book sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very quick paced because you're moving through so much of her time. I guess a lot is happening. I wouldn't like when you think of like the term of like fast paced being like a page turner, it didn't feel like super page turner to me, but it did feel like we are moving through her life. We're not gonna linger on anything.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, we span very fast, probably like 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
Or so. Just based off of like ages in my head that I'm going off of, but no spoilers. So yeah, and along with the literary fiction, this book is very prosy.
Yeah.
In a way that's like also very sarcastic and funny.
Yes, there's like
this book is funny.
Bonnie, what is her last name?
Garmis.
Yes. Bonnie Garmis has such a dry humor that I think is super fun. Like you'll be reading it and you'll be like, wait, that was funny. That was a good joke, but it's kind of hidden.
Yes. Yeah. And I think when you get into this book, it's very recognizable. Like right away you recognize that Elizabeth is not your typical even woman for the 1950s and the way she acts. And so I think that like whole dry humor, and we're gonna get into our third person omniscient voice in the book, is kind of like an outside like, and then this happened, and you're just like, it's not that I'm rolling on the floor laughing about it, but it is just like a funny, heartfelt book.
Yeah. Big thing that kind of I think goes hand in hand with the prose of this book, because the prose isn't like super in your face the way some dark academia books, like if you've read Atlas 6's prose is in your face. You are paying attention to that more than the story.
Yeah.
And that's not how this book is.
No.
It's just the topics of the book and the tone that carries throughout is a little bit more elevated than some books that are like just for funsies that you read.
I think that's what makes this like the award-winning like book of the year. Was it the book of 2022? Like it was something like Goodreads book or whatever, but I mean it was always front row at Barnes and Noble. Every time you walked in, like you were greeted with Elizabeth Zott's face.
This is what like readers with a capital R are reading. You know what I mean? Like it won. I can't think of what it's called, but like one of those like prestigious things. Like I think it's like called Hayfield or something like that, which doesn't sound very prestigious, but I was gonna say, does it say on your book? I would check my.
Winner of the Goodreads Choice Best Debut Novel Award.
But there's another one too.
Best Debut Fiction 2022. Basically, like Bonnie Garmis swept all the book awards with this book. Like it was everywhere. Even if you turn on the news, you're like, oh, lessons in chemistry. And I think this book kind of went on a really cool like story. Like Bonnie was writing other books, and then she went to work or something happened, and then she literally wrote this out of like feminine rage and like anger.
Yes.
So I think that's like that's like so cool coming from like, I'm writing this book and I'm working really hard and I have this great idea, and then someone says something and you're like, dude, like screw off. And then she like channeled all that energy into writing lessons in chemistry, and you see it. Yeah.
Elizabeth, like for a character who obviously like a big theme of this book is the struggles of women, especially in the 1960s.
Right.
Actually, at the end of the Audible version, I don't know if it's in the book as well because I listened to it as well. There was an interview with her, and she talked about she was super interested in writing in the 1960s because that was her mother's generation, and this kind of way where like women from the 1960s, they struggled a lot and they kind of did so silently, where it was it was right around, you know, all of the civil rights movements where it's kind of like, if we said out loud what was happening to us, everyone would agree that that's bad, but we're not gonna say it out loud because we're not gonna get help, and like that kind of stuff. But Elizabeth, the way she handles, like, there's scenes that are like so good, and we're not going to spoil anything, but just know that she is a very unique character. There's a lot of speculation about her being like somewhere on like the autism spectrum, which has never been confirmed, but like when you're reading it, you can see that she just has this kind of like
quirky personality.
Yeah, she's very what is the quote that Bonnie said? She said something about, people call Elizabeth Zott, they say that she is an uncompromising character. And Gurnis was like, no, I don't think she's uncompromising. I think she's just unwilling to dumb herself down to society's standards. Right. So if there's this idea of, that's not a women's place, she will go, what do you mean it's not the women's place? There's not a biological difference in this act. There's no reason that the differences in man and woman, we are all human. And she will like propel that and kind of like, whatever society's saying doesn't matter.
Yeah, and as a reader, you're just like, oh shit, like, and she says it in a way where it's very like, hell yeah, you're right. And then also you're like, and that is so funny the way you put that. Yes.
This book, like we said, is written in third person omniscient, which is typical for movies. This is kind of like, but not books. This is when you can be in everyone's head. And the way she will do this is you will jump into like side characters' heads. You will see someone just for a chapter and you will know what their thoughts are, which brings like a different light of humor, especially when it's like something, the main character is doing something in a public area, and for just a sentence we'll jump into someone else's head who's also in the room and get like their like opinions and how they're judging the situation. But a part of this is also, one of the main characters in this book is the dog.
Yes, 6:30.
Which we had, it was a little bit of a debate in book club how people felt about a dog being a main character, because you are in this dog's head. He is experiencing like Marley and me thoughts.
Yeah, 6:30 it will go down now as one of my favorite characters ever. He is a character because he is very smart, but I don't want to get into too many spoilers because I loved kind of discovering like what his role is and all of that. But let's just say that basically the book is told from this dog's perspective, and there's something like so freaking cool about that. Going off with the third person thing, what I like is like, sometimes especially in fantasy books, sometimes they'll switch POV and it'll be like this person's chapter and it's labeled like, oh, like this is like 6:30's chapter, and then it's like, I thought this and then I did this. But I kind of like that it really is just like bird's eye view of kind of looking into the story. And I thought it made it flow really well. And I'm excited to read more literary fiction like this. I read fantasy similar to that, but I'm really interested to read more, because I thought it was like easier to read kind of in this case, and usually when I read third person I feel lost. But I think that maybe that's just like a ode to like Bonnie's writing, that I felt very comfortable reading it.
No, she does an excellent job, and I think it does enhance this story because since it's so character based, it's all about how these people are reacting and doing things, and like the fact that she weaved it in like was like master style, because I feel like third person omniscient is like probably the hardest style to write in, because it's not definitely. Even like limited POV like you were talking about where you jump perspective. It's one sentence could be someone's thoughts and the next sentence could be someone else's entirely thoughts.
Yeah, you really have to know your characters well, and you have to plan out like this chapter. I want to give this character a little bit of time to shine and this character to be a little bit more mysterious. So like I just think it's so cool.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into our star ratings. You want to go first, Peyton?
Yes, I just want to pull up to like make sure. Okay. So, yes. So I gave this book, I actually tried to rate it a couple hours after I finished it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in any book, right when you finish it, you're on that like Delulu like book high.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave this a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I just kind of going into why I did that.
Yeah.
I really liked the quirky way of life stories, and I really think that this is that story. I also love the found family trope, and I love self-discovery, so that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I even put my Goodreads review, like, I probably wouldn't have picked this up if it wasn't for book club, but you know, I did say if you pick this up, it is a bit of a crazy plot line. It doesn't kind of go like this. It's kind of a roller coaster. So that could also be maybe a warning that like sometimes you're like, there's like a overall plot, but you're like, what's happening?
Yeah.
So this is definitely a 4 out of 5 for me. I recommend it, even if you're just reading for 6:30.
Even if you just went the dog's POV.
Yeah, the dog POV is spectacular.
Yeah, he's a king. Okay. My star rating, I keep going back and forth with what I want to give this book, and I don't even remember what I gave on Goodreads because I know I didn't write out my explanation for Goodreads because also like Peyton was saying, like the high of finishing the book, I always rate books incredibly higher.
Yeah.
But I am super torn on this book because, as you guys know, I like to rate books on the genre that they exist in, because if I see people on TikTok talk all the time about how they're like, I need to, for something to be a 5-star, it has to be like the book of my year, it has all these super high standards, and they're like, I only give like 4 books 5 stars, and I don't think that a literary fiction book for me as primarily a fantasy reader is ever going to give me the same feeling that Fourth Wing did. It can't. That's not possible, but it's also not trying to do that. Like, that's not it. To me, genres are kind of like different sports. Like, you're not going to be like, oh, well, the best soccer player is nothing against, like, if you put him in a wrestling match against, like, the best wrestler. Like, of course not. They're doing different things. They're trying different things. That being said, so I feel like I should give this book like a 4.5 because I feel like for literary fiction, like it really does so much and it's such a good book. But I did not super enjoy it. I can recognize how good of a book it is, so I don't want to rank it low because this book deserves higher ranking, especially when, you know, people make a lot of choices off of ranking and the book gets paid off of ranking and, you know, all these other factors. So I feel bad, but I feel like it's a 3.5 for me because I think if I did not have to read it for book club, one, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, but had I picked it up, because it is huge in the market right now, I feel like I would have DNF'd it. Like, I don't think that there was enough in the story to keep pushing me forward. But now that I finished the story for book club, like, I can recognize how good it was. It really wasn't for me.
Yeah. And I think it just goes back to genre. It's like, what genre do you enjoy? I kind of like, I like having like my own opinion, and I try not to look at Goodreads like overall, but the overall is a 4.32. So it's kind of like in the middle of like what you and I were thinking. So we're kind of like, I'm about average and you're a little below average on like kind of what people were thinking. But most people, now my friends on Goodreads, like the 3 people that have read it, it's 5-star, 5-star, and 4-star. And those people that I'm looking at are literary fiction people. Yeah. Like, I know them and they read primarily that. So if you're a lit fic chick lit girly or
Yeah.
guy if you're listening to this, I mean, hey, give it a chance. It's not that bad. We just love our fantasy, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's why we're in book club. We are expanding our palette. Our literary palette expands every month. But yeah, I mean, I think this is fair to, because we read Chick Lit last month with Evelyn Hugo, and you like Evelyn Hugo more. So there's no reason why you should be rating this higher than Evelyn Hugo.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, it's such a good book. I feel bad.
Yeah.
But like also, as much as we have this book podcast, like if you're listening to my extended thoughts, then like, I'm like, yeah, I agree with my extended thoughts. But if you look at my star rating, I am never like, yeah, that's the most accurate star rating. Like star ratings for me.
I hate star ratings.
I have too many like, but.
Yeah, I wish we could do like a percentage out of 100. I'd give it like a 78 or an 80%. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Or I would love to do like star rating. We can still stick with the star ratings, but it's like 3 categories where it's like, how much did I enjoy this? How like good of a book is this? And then like characters or plot or something like that.
Yeah.
Because like how good of a book this is, like how well written, how like just like, you know, a good book, how an English teacher would give it. Right. I think is 5 stars. But how much I enjoyed it is not. And that kind of skews me into the middle.
Right. Like if I was an English teacher, I'd be like, we are reading this book. This book is amazing. I need to incorporate this into my like curriculum. For books, I always say I try to like kind of toss aside the star. It's excellent, great, good, okay, and I didn't finish it. So this is like a good to great book. So that is the like hardcover stamp of a. I approve it. I think you should read it if you feel like lit fic is your genre. That you want to expand.
If you have a man in your life, I would make them read it.
Yes.
That is the one thing that I feel like it very well covers, like, kind of, like, the struggles and the unseen struggles of being a woman, that I want it to be like, here, take this. You might not enjoy reading it, but you need it anyways. This is like a man's veggies. Like, he needs to just read this.
just a little bit of, like, to be like, here, this is, like, a lesson in womanhood.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think that was like a pretty good kind of like introduction to the book. I have recently tried to start putting, especially in the description of our videos, when the spoiler section starts. So we are starting that spoiler section right now. So please leave and come back if you would like to hear all of the tea, because there is a lot of tea in this book.
You need to hear our thoughts about 6:30.
Yeah, and 6:30 and everything. Okay, so we are starting the spoiler section now. Goodbye, everyone who hasn't read the book. And okay, so here we are in the spoiler section.
Yes. All right, I think we should jump into Calvin Evans to start.
Yeah, this is like, we are thrown into this love story right off the bat in the book. Yes. And a lot of people are like, it's concerning how fast this relationship moved. We knew he was gonna die. He had to die. And the worst part is, so like our first week at book club, we had to read like chapter 13 but he died at chapter 13. And so we had to sit there for, like, I don't like reading ahead at book club because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything for anyone.
Never read ahead. Book club etiquette.
Yeah, don't read ahead. So I had to stop, and I was like, what? But the funniest part is, before I read that he died, I was kind of combing through to see how far I had to read, and I saw his gravestone inscription, like Bonnie did, like a all bold kind of like what was on his gravestone, and I was like, wait, what? And
what?
I turned over to my boyfriend and I was like, I think that someone's gonna die in this book really early, and I just spoiled it for myself. But yes, Calvin Evans.
They were so good together. Like, she wrote such a good, like, it wasn't very like a romantic, like, oh, but like afterwards you're like looking at it and you're like, no, they were perfect for one another.
Yes. It's so funny, like in life we all have types and there's like conventionally attractive people, but when you see a couple that actually just like have the same interests and are genuinely just like made for each other, it's like I was thinking of I saw this video once on, who knows, it could have been Vine, it probably was Vine, and it was this couple getting married in a GameStop cosplaying as Zelda and Link. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me, but this makes so much sense for you, and I'm so happy for you. And that, not that they were cosplaying as Zelda and Link, but they were complete nerds who, you know, we were talking about this, that they very much read like they're both on the spectrum, and they just have those like quirky, blunt personalities. Like Calvin was known for like holding grudges, and like Elizabeth kind of did too. And so they're like, they'd butt heads, but then they'd love each other, and they were just perfect.
Yes,
in their own
they
way.
Existed so well in like they had their bubble, and like their bubble was like the, you know, the loving space that they had between them, and no one else got into the bubble. There was one of my favorite moments was them in the lunchroom, and they're just
the lunchroom,
talking to one another, and then you get into other people's thoughts, and they're like, look at them, like, why are they always so close? Why are they always like touching and talking? And then the one guy's like, Tupperware containers, because like the lunch that's provided isn't good enough for them. Like,
I like love Bonnie Garmus did such a good job at like kind of painting that scene, because I literally imagine like a typical like cafeteria lunchroom that's like with a bunch of tables, and I imagine all of the Hastings Science Center like in a circle around them, and they are just like on an island by themselves. And like there's no chill in this book, but the Tupperware is so funny because it's like, oh, like the food here's not good enough, they had to make their own food. And then when Calvin tries to propose to Elizabeth in the middle of everyone, and everyone's like, no. And I can think, because I've been in that circle before where I'm like, oh my god, that guy's doing this, oh my god, and we're like watching like a train wreck from afar, and I know exactly what that's like. And that is like, that just shows like Calvin and Elizabeth's personalities. Like he thought it was right and okay to propose in the middle of a lunchroom, and also that he knew that she didn't want to be married.
Well,
it wasn't like he went against her wishes. It was like he just doesn't like, he's just quirky.
He just didn't understand the situation. She was like, oh, I don't really like weddings. And he's like, would this change your mind? Like, he doesn't get down on one knee. He doesn't like say like this speech about how much I love you. And like I feel like if he would have done a more traditional proposal, I think Elizabeth still would have said no, but I think she would have like, it would have gone down very differently because she could see the emotions behind. But instead, she's like, I don't really like weddings. And he's like, well, how about this? And then just like gives her like the ring box and like places it on the table, like he's expecting her to be like wooed away by the gesture.
Yeah, but it's not like in a douchebaggy, like egotistical way. It's literally in just like a, you are so smart that you are so stupid.
It's a very like Sheldon and Amy relationship.
Yes, that is the perfect way to describe it. It's like, he just doesn't get it, but he's like this like Nobel winning scientist,
famous scientist dude.
So Calvin, we kind of went over this. He does die by chapter 13 in the book. There's like 40 something chapters in the book. So this is hard, but it was like everything was centered around like his death and like the guilt that Elizabeth carried with her, but like also like was like, I need to move on because that's what you do.
Like she's pregnant.
Yes. With in book club we were not sure how to pronounce their kid's name. It is Madeline. because when I went back, because I also dual listened and read the book.
Yeah.
I was like, next time they say not Mad, because we just call her Mad, I was like, I'm gonna listen. It's Madeline. So
Madeline. Oh my gosh. So at book club, you know, we're it's a bunch of girls. Like, you know, there's no guy in our book club. And after Calvin dies, we spend the next, like, every time we had a discussion, we kept bringing up this idea of, like, oh, like, who else do you think, like, Elizabeth's with?
Yes.
And people were, like, shipping her with different people, which, I mean, is, like, a natural, like, human condition. And I would have loved to seen Elizabeth find love and happiness again and be able to move on, which she doesn't.
No.
But I did like that at the end, you know, Mad is she has her own journey about trying to figure out, like, who she is based off of her parents, and she doesn't, like, she has this very, like, strange relationship with her mom. She's been raised in a very unique way. She doesn't have a connection to her dad. But, like, at the end, like, Mad hearing and being like, no, like, your father and I were soulmates. And, like, hearing from other people about, like, just how in love and perfect they were for one another was, like, heartwarming, but a little bit sad because, like, you want Elizabeth to be able to move on. But I appreciated also that, like, even though he died early in the book wasn't about, like,
finding new love.
Finding someone new. It was about appreciating what that relationship was and looking at it through new lenses.
I think it's and I did too. I was like, who's gonna be the new love interest?
Yeah.
But I kind of like that it was like, no, he was love of my life, and I can't see myself with anyone else. And so and right now, like, the love of her life is her daughter.
Yeah.
The love of her, like, what matters to her is her found family, with who we, you know, eventually meet Harriet, and, you know, even what's his face, Walter.
Yes.
So yeah, she kind of finds her own. Everyone at book club thought she was gonna get with Dr. Mason.
Even though he had a wife.
He had a wife, and he, like, never came up again. Like, he kind of disappeared at the end of the book.
And then we thought, even though Walter Pine's ugly, but, like, the fact that they bonded over the daughters, people were like, oh, maybe they'll get together. But then Walter and Harriet got together.
And Harriet was married, but I do really want to quickly, like, preface this, and we didn't really do this, and I think it's good we did it in this non-spoiler section. There are trigger warnings in this book of sexual abuse, physical abuse, which just comes hand in hand with being a woman in the 1950s, I think. And the biggest thing is that they stay silent. Between Harriet, Elizabeth, and what's her name? Like, Frisk?
Miss
Frat, whatever. Her. Yeah. Like, they're like, oh, yeah, that happened to you too? Yeah, actually it did. And, like, maybe we should, like, join together and be women and, like, kind of, like, share this trauma so we can, like, become better. But instead it was like, no, suppress. Like, every job Elizabeth went to, this happened to her. And Calvin was kind of, like, the first man, like, relationship she had that was, like, good.
Yeah. I really loved the scene of Miss whatever Frats, the secretary, personnel person character, and Elizabeth when they're in the bathroom and they kind of have both just hit their breaking points, and they finally admit to one another, kind of in, like, anguish and, like, accidentally, that this stuff has happened to both of them. And, like, of course it has at this time, but, like, no one ever talks about it. And it just, one thing that I really liked about this book is there is a lot of characters, but we kept coming back to them and our perception on them kept changing. Because when Elizabeth is first fired because she's pregnant and Calvin's dead and all of that kind of stuff, we see Miss Fretz, or whatever her name is, in such a bad light. Like, she is a bitch. She is just supporting the patriarchy. She is, like, giving into this idea and, like, thinking that her pushing Elizabeth down is going to somehow propel her forward. and it doesn't. But then we revisit her and we see through the lens of like, it seems so villainous when we're in Elizabeth's head, but like honestly it's just like her own coping mechanism for the time.
Yeah, it's like if I kind of see them as an authority figure and just do what they want me to do, I also will be protecting myself in the long run. Whereas Elizabeth went against the grain, and that was her punishment.
Yeah.
And this is like what I need to do to set you in your place, which is just like horrible.
Yeah.
So that's like a really big part of the book I wanted to touch on because I think it's really important. It wasn't great to read, but it also like it just made me view Elizabeth as like such a strong character and so strong-willed, and like even at her weakest she like didn't let it affect her. Like when she like almost like when she had the knife in her bag.
Yes. So I want to talk about that because the first scene where we see this like sexual abuse and rape against Elizabeth, she like is very like it's like it's heart-wrenching to read. It's like in your pit in your stomach. Like I like had to like stop and like take a breather. Like it is very, very tough. Even though she has this like, I don't want to say winning, but she has this like, she takes the pencil, she stabs him, he's injured, but like, and then she carries the pencil throughout, and so it's very hard to read, and it's a thing that happens. So then when we cycle back and you think it's gonna happen again with the exec, my like gut was in like my like whole stomach dropped. I was so uncomfortable. I was like, no, this can't be happening again. Like you feel all of that like horribleness again, and when she just pulled out a knife, I was like, yes, like this is the relief I needed in this moment because I couldn't have it happen to her again. And so the fact that she got this kind of like power move and like kind of killed him is like amazing.
And then like her and Walter like rode on like this car or whatever. They're like, I hope you never get better, like whatever.
Hope you die.
I hope you die. Like it's just like so funny. But once again, like that is a perfect example of like Elizabeth Zott moments.
Yeah. She's a force in an entirely different way than Evelyn Hugo was from our last book review.
Yeah.
They are both a force of nature and in different ways.
Yeah.
Which I, love a complex female character. Like, I love seeing how you can be this, like, force of a woman from different lenses.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to talk about the priest at all?
Because
so the nice thing about this book is that there's a lot of, like, plot threads that are tossed out and then don't get touched on for a very long time until like the very end of the book. And so we were theorizing so hard who could be this mysterious pen pal that Calvin had. There were so many theories. We really thought it was going to be the dad for a long time, and that's why I stopped talking when he said he hated the dad. What else was there? There was so many theories.
We were talking about like Sad Mom.
Yeah.
We had like no idea. We really thought it was a family member.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had like no idea, but the fact that it was a priest, especially since like was Calvin Christian? I don't think so. They were he was raised in a very like Catholic setting, and I think he kind of like that was like he despised that. I know obviously Elizabeth is like, because I'm an atheist.
I'm an atheist on live television.
Yeah, so we know. So it was really cool to see at the end, kind of like we know Mad has been around this priest, and then also like Elizabeth coming to understand. Like I kind of like that she wasn't like, well, your religion's shit and I don't believe in
Yeah.
that. Like, she was kind of like, okay, like, what's up? Like, Elizabeth really saw people for like who they were and not necessarily what they were labeled as. And we see this with the priest. Yes, Calvin's old pen pal. I forget his name.
I know, that's why I put on the document. I just put priest because I forgot his name.
Yeah, it's like, I want to say, I don't know. Anyways, you know.
Yeah. I also really liked that he kind of reflected Elizabeth very well. I loved the moment when he like comes to the house to talk to Mad while the show's airing because he thinks that Elizabeth won't be home, and then Elizabeth comes home and he has this awkward moment where he's like, oh my god, I am a grown-ass man in this house alone with this child. What the hell was I thinking? He was like, this looks horrible. But then they have this like dinner scene, and like Matt, like the things with the family tree came up and things like that, and the priest is like, no, you shouldn't think that way. Like, he very much matches all of Elizabeth's ideology just from a different perspective. And like the fact that Elizabeth was like I swear to god she had to have the moment where she was like, yeah,
actually, yeah, are you sure you're a priest?
Am I finding religion?
Am I finding
religion talks like this?
Yes, yeah. And I know, I love that scene where he's just like, this, and then Mad's like, this is my friend. Like, this is, and Mad's like, so like, Mom, like, what's wrong? This is my friend. And she's like, you're friends with a priest? And he's like, yeah, she's been coming. I've been helping her find her family because, and then because, the family tree, they're like, because she failed her family tree. And he's like, why? See, that's so stupid. Going off of that, Mad, this is such a character focused book. We have such like a amazing crew of characters. Mad, we really got into this at book club because people were like, there is no way this 4-year-old is this smart. Like,
but like, also she's in a classroom. She's got to be at least 6 to be in kindergarten. Oh no, because she lied. They lie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Elizabeth lied about her age, so she's 4. Because you have to be 5 to be in kindergarten.
Yeah.
She's like 4 or 5. But yeah.
I love that this book, even though it is very like highbrow literary shit, it has this like magical realism to it where like we have the perspective of 630, who is like this actualized character who can speak and like
walks her to school,
knows all these words, and we have this 4-year-old who's like an insane genius, and people get so much more in book club got so much more mad about the 4-year-old because that's like a more tangible thing than like the dog that's crazy intelligent.
Yeah, and I love how, like, 6:30, like, we'll pick her up from school, like, oh, here's my ride, 6:30, the dog is here to pick me up, so I think that's, like, so, yeah, that's true. A lot of people were like, I don't believe this, but this dog, this is fun. Dogs can know, like, 900 words.
Oh, my goodness.
I stand 6:30.
Yes.
Yeah, 6:30 kind of takes the like father figure almost in like the household. He's like protector. He's the caregiver. He's like Elizabeth's right hand man, which is like great. So
I love that
Mad
goggles in the lab.
Yeah, Mad is completely like genius, crazy. I mean, she is the product of Calvin, Evans, and Elizabeth Zott. I like how Elizabeth was like, my daughter will know everything, and I'm gonna raise her this way, and I love that. So, but a very big part of this book, like I said, is found family, and that would have not happened if it wasn't for Harriet Sloane.
Yes. Oh my goodness. When she comes in, when Mad is just a little baby, and she's like, oh, you only thought about giving up your child twice? Like, that's rookie numbers. Like, that's nothing. Like, it just very much paints this idea of, like, motherhood is hard as shit. Because Elizabeth always was like, oh no, I recognize that that's, like, a path for people, but I think when she experienced it, it like brought it to a whole new light for her.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the like fairy godmother aspect that she plays in their lives, but also we also see kind of the background of like Harriet's toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And but also like being I agree. I love that scene where Elizabeth is like, I want to give her away. And she's like, yeah, that's normal feeling. Like,
yeah,
it's not talked about because you're shamed for it. But we're all thinking it when we have kids. That, like, you know what? I probably just don't want you anymore. Especially if they're doing it on her own.
Yeah, I feel like Harriet is the voice of reason to Elizabeth. Like, Elizabeth lives up here in her expectations of the world, and Harriet kind of helps, like, guide and pursue it, like, through. And even gets her, like, putting the correct article in Vogue. Oh my god, I loved that moment. That kind of, like, final, like, redemption and retribution for Elizabeth.
Yeah, and that leads us into the end of the book here, where we kind of get our like wrap up of this like mystery plot. We know who the donor is at Calvin's school that we learn in the beginning.
Hold on, I'm just so excited about this. I guessed fucking like week 1 of book club. I said, I bet the donor, because everyone's like, it's the dad. I was like, I bet it's the mom.
And I think that's perfect because it goes right into like women are lied to, like women don't have choices. Like her baby was taken away from her and told that it was dead, and vice versa. He thought his mom died during childbirth. Like, okay, trauma. And so I think it's so beautiful that Mad is searching for family the whole book, and Elizabeth is searching for a happier life for her and her daughter, and they find it through this way. And I even like how, what is it, Mrs. Parker? I don't know her first name.
Yeah, Avery Parker.
Yeah, Avery. Yeah. I like how she's like, listen, Elizabeth, just because I'm a successful woman doesn't mean I have like my own struggles, because we find out that she needs that guy, I forget his name,
Wilson, the lawyer.
Yeah, the lawyer to sign off on the checks. Like, she has to go through him because she never married.
Yeah. Which was a power move for her, because if she would have married, then a guy would have had control of everything. So she remains a bit of control. The ending of this book is so, like, perfect. Like, a lot of the times in these types of, like, literary books, we have, like, oh, like, I think the ending could have been this or this. But the idea of it just being like, yeah, let's have dinner tonight with the whole family. And the whole family, meaning Elizabeth Zott, Mad Zott, Avery Parker, the lawyer Wilson, Walter Pine, Harriet Salone, the priest, like,
all this
Dr. Mason,
found family.
Like, that is the found family that this book has been building to. It's just, like, mwah, like, perfect.
Yes, yeah. And everyone was on their own kind of mission during this book. And I love that Elizabeth also is like, goes to Walter's house and like Harriet's there and she's like, oh, this is weird, but also I'm quitting.
Yeah. She's like, how did I not know y'all were fucking? How did I not see this?
That's Elizabeth, because Elizabeth is worried about Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And so that I like love that. So yeah, there's a huge happy ending, and also like this book instilled a lot of hope in me. Like, there's hope for these characters. They can't solve, build woman Rome overnight, but they're making small chunks. Like that woman who was a caller into the episode, and she's going to be a brain surgeon or whatever she wanted to get into. So like, I just think that the book is very impactful for like female culture, and also just kind of gives another glimpse into that time period for women.
Yeah, it's so perfect. And like you were saying, that idea of hope is, if Elizabeth Zott can create this world for herself in the 1960s, what can I do now in 2020s?
Yeah, it's a super empowering book, even with all of the like funny, quirky sides of everyone's personalities. So I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, this book isn't necessarily one that we usually jump into. But
Yeah.
I'm super happy to say I've read it. This is a book I'm definitely
Mhm.
gonna recommend to like my nana.
Yeah.
She grew up in the 70s, but I just think
Mhm.
it'd be really interesting for her to read.
Yeah.
And I really think that our kids are gonna be seeing this in their English classrooms.
Yes. Yes, as they should.
All right, if that's all you have, Aubrey.
Yes.
All right, so that is all we have time for today. What did you guys think of lessons in chemistry? What are your thoughts? And if you haven't and you have this episode spoiled the whole book for you, are you still gonna read the book?
Yeah.
And of course, if there's anything you want us to read in the future, please let us know. We're always, our literary palette is expanding, people, so we are ready to read more books.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us and happy reading.